Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Scaraya. Welcome to Evergreen Charter School's online workshops. This is the 6 p.m. workshop about the public charge rule in English. The Spanish workshop will be at 7 p.m. tonight. Max, can you translate that?
Buenas noches, soy Max Hadler y estoy acá con Sean de Evergreen y estamos haciendo los talleres en línea. Este es el taller de las 6 de la tarde sobre la regla de carga pública en inglés. A las 7 de la tarde hacemos el mismo taller en español.
If you haven't registered for that, then go to our website, ecsworkshops.org. I'll put that into the chat, and you can register or you can dial in. Max, can you translate that?
Para los que quieren presenciar el taller en español, si no se han registrado hasta ahora, tiene que ir al sitio de web de Evergreen que está en el chat ahora y registrarse o conseguir el número de teléfono para llamar a las 7.
Thank you for joining us tonight as we begin our online workshops to keep families informed of the facts. Tonight's presentation will give the facts on the recent changes to the public charge rule that affect many families. Today's presenters are Abby Susel and Max Nadler, joining us from New York Immigration Coalition based in New York City. For today's presentation, Abby and Max will present for 20 minutes, and there will be a question and answer session for the last 10 minutes. You can ask a question by posting a question in the chat box. So when you look at your control panel on your right of your screen, you'll see a chat box. You can just type in your question right there, and at the end, at the last 10 minutes, we'll go through those questions. Thank you, and over to Abby and Max.
Great. Thank you very much, Sean, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Hopefully, for those of you who joined on the webinar, you can see the screen with the title slide that we're going to be talking about public charge, which my colleague Abby is going to talk about in more detail, and also how it relates to accessing care as an immigrant in New York in the context of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic. So the most important message that we want you all to know, even before explaining what this public charge rule is all about, is that it's really important for everyone to understand that immigrant families can and should seek the care that they need during this really difficult time. Anyone can see a doctor in New York. It doesn't matter if you have health insurance. It doesn't matter what your immigration status is. It doesn't matter what your income is. You can and should get healthcare advice and consult with a healthcare provider if you feel that you need to. If you are sick and you're wanting to talk with someone, the best person to talk to, and again, we recommend that you talk by phone and not go to a hospital or to a clinic, but rather call ahead of time to get medical advice. The best place to do that is to call your primary care provider if you already have a regular place that you go for checkups, your regular family doctor. If you don't have a provider, then you can call the coronavirus hotline in Nassau County through the Nassau County Department of Health. The phone number is 516-227-9570. And you can also call the New York State Department of Health coronavirus hotline. That number is 888-364-3065. It's important. This is particularly important for immigrant families and for people who don't have status, and so they don't qualify for most types of health insurance. There is a particular limited type of health insurance that anyone, even if you don't have immigration status, can qualify for. It's called Emergency Medicaid, which covers certain emergency conditions, and in New York State, that includes testing and evaluation and treatment for COVID-19 or for the coronavirus. So it's really important that even if someone is out of status or doesn't have an immigration status, that you realize that you can get these services covered for free in New York State if you are low income and would otherwise qualify for Medicaid. And we've put together through our organization, the New York Immigration Coalition, some one-page info sheets about emergency Medicaid and COVID-19 treatment. You can find that and other information about services that are available at nyic.org. So I'm going to transition to Abby in 1 second to give us more details about what public charge is, but just to be sure that everyone knows right off the bat in terms of the relationship between public charge and coronavirus, no testing or prevention or any other type of treatment that anyone receives for coronavirus will be used against any person in a future public charge test. So we'll tell you more about what public charge is, but just to say right away, there is no reason not to seek services related to coronavirus because of public charge concerns, because they will not be held against you in the future. So I'm going to kick it over to Abby now to explain a little more about what public charge is.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being on this webinar. I'm Abby Cecile, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about public charge. You also might have heard about public charge in the sense that many folks are confused with, should I use public benefits and will it impact my immigration status? So that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about. So public charge is a test in certain immigration applications to see if someone's likely to rely on the government for support. It's one of multiple tests that a person would go through when they're doing that application process for a green card. It's not a new test, but a lot of people are talking about public charge now because the public charge rule did change and the Trump administration is still working to finalize changes to the rule. We saw the finalized changes that were produced, but lawsuits have been fighting back against those changes. The Supreme Court said that the changes can go into effect while the lawsuits are going on. So that's a bit confusing. So the main thing to just know here is that we might have updates in the future about public charge, but for now, the public charge rule has changed. So when did the changes go into effect? They went into effect February 24th of this year. So as of today, the public charge rule has changed, and we're going to tell you how it's changed. So first, before getting into the changes, who does it apply to? If you have a green card right now and your next step, or you're thinking about doing the application for citizenship, during that process that you'd go through, you don't have a public charge test. There aren't any questions during that process that are public charge related. Also, if you or someone in your family is going to go through the application process for one of these statuses that's up on the screen here, like applying for refugee status, applying for asylee status, applying for victims of trafficking visas, victims of domestic violence visas like U visas and VAWA self-petitioners. There's more humanitarian statuses here that we haven't listed, but if you're applying for one of these statuses, there's no need to be concerned with public charge. There's no test there. And if you have one of these statuses and you are thinking about next applying for a green card, there's also no public charge test for you if you already have one of these statuses. So who has a public charge test? That would be people who are applying for a green card who are not in one of those exempt categories that we just went through. Certain visas also have public charge related questions, but the main focus is people applying for green cards. Yes, there is a public charge test. So how does it work? It involves looking at multiple factors in a person's life to make that decision if it looks like they're going to rely on the government for support in the future. So what are the factors that will be asked about on the test? The test, again, happens during that application process for a green card. There will be questions about someone's health, family size, education and skills, income, employment, and certain past public benefits used. And the government will look at all of these together to make that determination if a person's likely to rely on the government for support in the future. So I'm going to talk more about what we mean by there will be questions about your or someone you know's use of public benefits. So there are only certain benefits that can be asked about as part of this test. So in the long-standing rule, because I mentioned that it's not a new rule, it's been around for a really long time. So in the long-standing rule, they asked about two benefits: use of cash assistance like supplemental security income or TANF, and then a program, a specific program paid for by Medicaid that is institutionalization for long-term care. So what do we mean by that? We mean someone who gets approval by the government to live long-term in a facility like a nursing home. So it's a very special kind of Medicaid. But I mentioned that as of February 24th, the rule has changed. So there are now 4 benefits that the government can ask about. So first one is the same that I mentioned, cash assistance. The second one is federally funded non-emergency Medicaid, and we're going to come back to that to explain it more. The third one is SNAP, and then the fourth one is Section 8 and Section 9 housing programs, so federal housing programs. But the most important thing is you're probably thinking about a lot of different government benefits. If it wasn't one of the 4 that I just said, then it is not in the public charge rule. So I'm going to hand it back to Max really quick to explain a little bit more about what we meant by there's only federally funded non-emergency Medicaid in the rule, and that there are many health programs that are actually not in the rule and will not be asked about in the public charge test.
Great, thanks, Abby. So as Abby mentioned, the vast majority of health coverage or access programs that are available to people in New York State and on Long Island do not have any type of public charge jeopardy associated with them. So you can use them without being worried about consequences as they relate to public charge. One is emergency Medicaid, which is the program I mentioned before. You could also be enrolled in regular Medicaid as long as it's for the purposes of coverage for a pregnant woman or a child. Then in that case, even the federally funded Medicaid would be exempt or wouldn't be counted against someone in a public charge test. The same goes for the Essential Plan, which is a program in New York State for people who are slightly above the Medicaid income limit. If you go on to New York State of Health, which is New York Health Insurance Exchange, and you enroll in private health insurance and you get tax credits or subsidies to help pay for the cost of your health insurance premiums, those also wouldn't be held against you. If you have Medicaid that's funded by the state of New York, that would not be held against you. If you are a child under the age of 19 and you're enrolled in Child Health Plus, that would also not be held against you. And the same goes for programs that are not technically health insurance, but that help you pay for accessing health services. So paying a sliding fee scale at a community health center like HRH Care, for example, would not be held against you. We also know that lots of people are not entirely sure what benefits they have or what they are eligible for. And so you can find out both pieces of that information by calling New York State of Health directly. So in the pink box on the right side of your screen, that phone number is there. It's 855-355-5777. And you can get a free consultation and screening to see if you're eligible for health insurance, or you can also call there to find out what type of coverage you are already enrolled in. All right, I'm going to turn it back to Abby to talk about some non-health benefits now.
Great, thank you, Max. So there's, as I said, if it's not one of the 4 benefits, then it's not part of the rule. And there are many, many more government programs that exist that are not in the rule. So examples of those are WIC, that's not in the rule. If you are receiving unemployment benefits, that will not impact your public charge test. If you're receiving disaster assistance, food from a food bank, or in a homeless shelter, or other child care related services, those are not part of the rule. And there's many, many other programs that we're not listing here, but again, if it wasn't one of the 4, it's not in the rule. Another really important thing is that only the benefits used by the applicant count in that person's public charge test. So what do we mean by that? So for example, if someone is going to go through a public charge test because they're applying for a green card and they have US citizen children who have benefits, the benefits that their children are receiving are not going to impact that parent in their application for a green card. So it's not, the benefits that anyone else in a person's family are receiving, like their parents, their grandparents, their children, those are not counted against that person. Just the benefits that person, the applicant, has will be counted in their public charge test. So I'm going to hand it back to Max, who's going to go through some phone numbers and resources for you to reach out to.
Great, thanks, Abby. We're giving you a lot of information and some of it's pretty complex. So I think the most important things to take away are where you can go to get additional information or to get consultation in case you have questions down the road. And so one really important resource is what's called the New Americans Hotline. This is a line that is available to anyone in New York State for free to ask questions about public charge and to get immigration legal advice. So if you call the New Americans Hotline, the number is 800-566-7636. The operators are trained on public charge information. They can answer basic questions about it. And if you need a more in-depth consultation with an immigration attorney or an immigration expert, then they can refer you to services that are available in your area. It's free, it's anonymous, and they can link to Language Line to provide services in basically any language that anyone would need over the phone. So we definitely recommend that for legal services. There's also written resources available if you are comfortable going online and you want to look up information online, either at our website, our organization, nyic.org/public-charge. There's also a bigger national coalition of organizations working on these issues called Protecting Immigrant Families, and there's a lot of good resources there at protectingimmigrantfamilies.org. And then turning back to the resources that are available specifically around coronavirus and the fight against COVID-19 in New York State. As we mentioned before, you can get information through the same hotlines that you would call if you need to get linked up to a healthcare provider. So the State Department of Health coronavirus hotline, which is 888-364-3065, or the hotline that's specific to Nassau County, which is 516-227-9570. And again, we have a lot of information available on our website as well in multiple languages. So if you want to go onto the NYIC website at nyic.org, you can get a number of different one-pagers about how COVID-19 is affecting New York in terms of access to healthcare, but also in terms of access to education and to food and information about what's happening in immigration courts. So there's lots of information available on the website if you have access to it. Another really important thing that we want to make sure to recognize and also to encourage people to use as a resource is that while we're dealing with this public health crisis and an infectious disease epidemic, there's also many, many, many other health issues that people are dealing with as we do every day, and that includes mental health services. So, for example, the stress caused by job loss, by dealing with the illness of family members and friends, the isolation of needing to observe shelter-in-place orders, all of that can lead to mental health service needs. And in recognition of that, the New York State Department of Health set up an emotional support hotline at the beginning of this pandemic that's open and available to anyone and free across New York State. The phone number is 844-863-9314. And again, that's a service that's available to anyone. And you can call and request an interpreter as well if you prefer to receive services in a language other than English. All right, so that is the end of our presentation. Our emails are up on the screen, so in addition to the other resources that we pointed out during the presentation, you should definitely feel free to reach out to either of us if you have follow-up questions. And we also have about 10 minutes left to answer questions right now.
Hi, Abby and Max. I did have a question. The public charge rule, how does that affect protected groups?
So that's a good question. I'll
And if you could just explain what a protected group might be and what are some examples?
Yeah, so actually I'll go back to the slide that mentions that so that you can all see. There are certain groups of immigrants who never have a public charge test. So the two big categories, when you say protected groups, the two big categories of humanitarian statuses that don't have a public charge test are refugees and asylees, but there are other ones that are up here on this screen. So for example, if someone is going to apply for one of these statuses, they don't have to worry about public charge. And if someone already has one of these statuses and their next step would be to apply for a green card, they also don't have to worry about having a public charge test. So we say exempt from the public charge rule.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you, Abby, and thank you, Max, for joining us. They will be joining us for, there's going to be a 7 p.m. Workshop, Spanish workshop version of this. So if you know someone that might want to join in, please let them know. But thank you very much for working with our communities and getting this information out, especially now. It's such an important time for our families to get the facts, so they can get the assistance that they need.
Great, thank you so much. And definitely reach out to us if anyone has any follow-up questions.
Thank you.